everybody. Welcome into the Couch GMs podcast. It is Friday, October 15th, 2021. And I'm your host, George Kerth, here with Cody Roadcap, back from his absence. Cody, I missed you.
I missed you too, George. Thank you for holding down the fort while I recovered from heartbreak, excitement of what was the Packers-Bengals game on Sunday. I still don't know what happened for most of that game. It was such a blur, exciting moment, but I'm glad to be back on the podcast.
As one of our friends said in a text message, I think that was too fitting. I have to share with the fans. It was so fitting that you went to a game that the kickers were awful. It's too fitting. I think they knew you were there and just wanted to make you even more angry. But this episode, we're going to do a week 6 fantasy outlook, and we're going to have a little bit of buy low, sell high. But before we get into our show, I think we have a little bit of bookkeeping to do. First off, I want to thank Jake Zimmers for filling in with me on our Tuesday show. He did great. I hope you guys enjoyed it as well. And Cody, I know you have something you want to say as well.
Yeah, as always, thanks for Jake, and be sure to listen to his podcast, the Bang Your Head podcast. And then also, if you've been on our social medias, if you've been watching us on YouTube, you've seen we spiced up our logo, added some new graphics, and I just want to give a shout out to a former coworker of mine, Sam Nicodemo, for coming through with those graphics for us. She's actually works at ESPN. You've probably seen some of her work on E60, so it's cool that she was willing to help us out for a person up there at the big corporation ESPN. So thank you for all the people helping us make this show. We're getting a lot of good feedback, but I guess what you really want to hear is some NFL news.
Yes, NFL news, and Jake and I covered a lot of the good stuff on our Tuesday show, so if you missed anything, feel free to go back. Again, a lot of injuries, but there is one big piece of news that's going to change how you watch football on Wild Card Weekend. We know last year they went to 6 games on Wild Card Weekend. We are going to stick now with 2 games on Sunday following the 3 on Saturday and have a Monday night football into the playoffs. Monday night football wild card. Cody, you're shaking your head a little bit. I don't know if I love it either, but I want to hear your opinion here first.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of it at all. I think they need to figure it out how, because it's definitely not going to be fair if the team on Monday night then has to turn around and play on Saturday. So like they have to find a way that like can't happen. And I don't know how, because they're not redoing seedings, like how they can guarantee that the team playing on Monday night doesn't play on Saturday. They almost have to be the Sunday night game. I did see one person tweet out when this did happen. They tried to play the odds with the seeding. So give like the 2 seed um the Saturday games, the 2-7, and then the 3-6 would be on Monday, and that way you would expect the 3 seed to win and go play the 2 seed, which would give the 2 seed a little bit of an advantage for being the 2 seed since they lost out on their bye. But again, that's a lot of if this happens, because we all know it's very rarely that the NFL playoffs go chalk wise. And so I'm not a huge fan of it. Monday night, it's tough, short weeks in the playoffs. You want the teams at their best. It's already hard enough for when a team plays Sunday night and then goes to a Saturday afternoon game. Imagine them doing that on Monday now. I know it's a big money pool. Hopefully they're going to, get the cap up. That's what they want. The ESPN, they're going to have a big part in this on the Monday night broadcast. But from a player's perspective, I don't think they would like it. And as a fan, uh, if my team plays on Monday and then has to turn around and play Saturday, and we're banged up or a little injured or slow off the bus, all big things that go into playoff football. Just not a big fan of it here on the surface.
Yeah, you pretty much took the words right out of my mouth. I was worried about rest when it came to playing a Monday night game, even turning Monday night into Sunday. And if they were playing a team that played, like you said, the former Saturday instead of Monday, and then they give them 2 whole extra days of rest there, it's 2 extra days to scout, it's 2 extra days to practice, rest up, because at that point of the season, like you said, everyone's all banged up. I'm just worried about that. Like, the NFL tries to eliminate short weeks for the most part when you get to the end of the season. Like, Thursday night football is not a thing as soon as college football ends, and they move everything to Saturday because that makes it a more tight schedule. There's not that random teams playing on 4 days rest. And I mean, there is still Monday Night Football until week 18 doesn't have Monday Night Football, but in the playoffs, it becomes even more important. I just don't like that there's going to be teams at disadvantage because of it. Exactly what you said.
Yeah, I mean, but the fan in me is like excited for an extra day of playoff football. Don't get me
Well,
wrong.
oh
I'm
yeah,
not.
totally.
It's just I'm not a huge fan of it. If it was my favorite team or a team, like I want them to be at their best playing in the playoffs. I want the playoffs to be the best matchups, and I feel like the Monday night game could be a big hamper. But George, we're already talking about playoffs, and it's really only week 6, so we should probably get into our week 6 fantasy outlook.
Week 6 not only features another game in London, which, again, if you're on the East Coast, Sundays are just football, wake up to go to bed, but we also have to start dealing with bye weeks. So I have to mention that here first. Teams on bye in week 6 include the Atlanta Falcons, New York Jets, San Francisco 49ers, and New Orleans Saints. So less games for us to cover, less games for you guys to play players in fantasy, but we're going to give you the best advice that we can to fill in some of those spots that you may be dealing with buys. I know I have a couple of teams that are very heavy on buy. I feel like it's week 6 and then I don't have any buys for 3 weeks. I don't know what it is, but
Next week's going to be
it's just because
brutal.
there's some big teams. Oh,
Yeah.
who's week 7?
Uh, I don't have the full list in front of me, but I want to say I know the Bills are on it, and that's a fantasy powerhouse right now. And do they get the Chiefs too? Are like the Bills and the Chiefs both out the same week? I know, so it's two.
That'd be something.
Yeah, I'll double check while you break down this first game, or
Okay.
we can just wait till next
Um,
Sunday or next week when we
Well, I
break down
know
those matchups.
two other teams that are going to be on bye next week are the Dolphins and Jaguars because you always get a bye after traveling to London. So we'll start off at the early kickoff over across the pond. Miami Dolphins, Jacksonville Jaguars. We not too exciting of a fantasy matchup. It's not gonna line up like last week where the Falcons were able to you're able to start any Falcon that was healthy really because of the injuries and Patterson and Mike Davis and even Zacchaeus, Kyle Pitts went off. It's not going to be the case over here, I don't think. There is some good news, and that is Tua may be back. He has been practicing with the Dolphins. He designated to return, opened his practice window. We will find out more when we see if he travels to London with the team. But it seems like everything is trending to the positive. I think that may help the Dolphins' weapons against a poor defense. That may make me feel more confident about a Myles Gaskin, maybe even a Jalen Waddle in this matchup.
Yeah, I was gonna actually ask you about Miles Gaskin. Finally, I've been praying for it, hoping for it. He had a breakout game. Maybe all it took was me putting him on my bench in our league of record. But Miles Gaskin, he broke out with 2 touchdowns, finished as RB3 on the week. Solid performance. I feel like you have to throw him back out there this week, especially if you have a running back on by. Maybe if you had Kamara and Gaskin, like if you're gonna play him in since Kamara is on by. Um, but I think Devontae Parker, he might even be traveling with the team, so he might be back. And I do think this offense does improve with Tua at quarterback. They weren't great under Brissett, but you'd hopefully with Tua back there, they do form some sort of competency. Hopefully they continue to ride Miles Gaskin. Like I said, it's not a great matchup by any means. It is kind of ironic that the two teams in Florida are going all the way to London to play, but that's what it is. Jacksonville wise, you got James Robinson. I don't hate Trevor Lawrence this week if you're in a streamer or in daily fantasy. And, we're always going to talk about Marvin Jones seems to be a safe pick, even though he's been a little lackluster the last few weeks. But I feel like he's a guy that if you need a spot start, if you lost Debo Samuel this week because of bye, Marvin Jones could pop right into your flex wide receiver 2 spot.
I like that analysis, and I don't think there's really much more to talk about with this game. Not a huge set of fantasy teams here. So we can come back to the US in
So,
the early
well,
games.
hang on
Oh,
real
go ahead.
quick. I have the buys up, and Miami
Uh-huh.
doesn't have a bye next week. They're playing, which is interesting coming off of
That's got to be the first time
I think
in
it
this
happened
whole
once
international
last
series
year.
thing.
I think it happened once
Okay.
last year, but Miami is not on a bye last week or next week. But the Bills, that higher powered offense is the Cowboys
Mhm.
and their high powered offense, the Chargers and their high powered offense, and the Vikings and the Steelers that have some solid fantasy options. So next week is brutal for bye. So get prepared or just, chalk it up as a loss and do something else on Sunday. Maybe you don't want to even watch football because your fantasy team isn't going to do that well. But before we get too far ahead to next week, we should continue on with this week in the 1 o'clock games. Speaking of the Minnesota Vikings, they're going to the Carolina Panthers, who your Eagles had a surprising win against on Sunday.
Yeah, they
Dalvin
did.
Dalvin Cook practiced for the first time in full since the Arizona Cardinals game. All signs look to him coming back, hopefully. I mean, Matson has been great in his absence, but he is also banged up with a shoulder injury. But unfortunately, CMC seems to have a little bit of a setback as he did not practice on Thursday. I mean, is this going to be another year of the CMC? He's almost back. Like last week, it was CMC's confident he'll play. He didn't play, and now he's not even practicing. Like, are you trying to trade CMC at this point? Just like he's a big name. Maybe I can get something for him. People think he's going to be back the next week. We went through this last. He'll be back. He'll be back, and he just never came back.
I mean, I don't think this injury is as serious as last year's. Like, I feel like he's going to be back. But, like, even last year, like, I guess he didn't have a serious injury, came back for a week and got hurt again. So, maybe. I mean, I would think you have to demand a huge haul to trade him because if he comes back healthy, he jumps right in your lineup and scores you 25 points. That's just what happens. But if you can get another first round running back, like later first round running back, even like maybe like an Austin Eckler kind of move or a Nick Chubb and another piece to go in your starting lineup with it, definitely pull the trigger and move CMC because it's not worth the frustration and you can help probably put together even more fantasy points than CMC would give you in a healthy situation.
Yeah, I definitely like that. If you could pull a Nick Chubb or an Austin Eckler with like a Devontae Adams or a Tyreek Hill or even a guy like Stephon Diggs, who's been a little bit under the radar, but we're going to talk about at the end of the show. That's you might be considering. Maybe if it's Diggs and Eckler, you throw in a late round flyer as well. But
Mhm.
he's a big name. You can try to move him if you don't want to deal with all this injuries, and maybe you have Chuba Hubbard too, and you'll have the double whammy. If he is out, you still have the guy in Carolina, so something to think about. But the Vikings wide receivers, they're in your starting lineups. Jefferson, Thielen, they're both playing well enough. Is Tyler Conklin on our dartboard this week? Is he off? Is the guy you're aiming for? What are your thoughts on Tyler Conklin?
Um, I mean, Carolina's defense was pretty tough for the first few weeks, and then I think last week the Eagles tight ends kind of lit them up. Plus, I mean, when you're looking at your bye weeks, you're missing Kyle Pitts this week. You're missing, I guess, somebody in the 49ers tight end room. I mean, Ross
Well,
Dwelly,
George
and you
Kittle
don't
was
have
hurt,
Kittle.
but before that, yeah.
Kittle was hurt, but I mean, people were playing Dwelly last week. I don't know. He was not great, but you have to throw somebody else in there or a couple extra guys in there on the dartboard, and that's not a bad matchup. The Vikings have been very competent on offense lately, throwing the ball all over the yard. I would give a shot. I would give a shot on that one.
Yeah, I like Tyler Conklin too. It's still too early for any of the other Carolina Panthers tight ends since they've moved on from Dan Arnold. Um, Hopefully Tommy Trumbull eventually comes around. But that's probably enough for that matchup. The next matchup is George's second favorite team, the Los Angeles Chargers, going to the Baltimore Ravens, or should I say the Baltimore Lamar Jacksons, because he currently ranks 15th in total yards compared to every other team in the NFL. He has like 1,800 and some yards. I think that puts him at right between 14 and 16 for team total yards. He's electric. He did it through the air last week, which I wish Tyler was here to be able to talk to us about it because I know he always talks about how Lamar struggles to throw the ball, and he now holds the record for all-time completion percentage with throwing more than 40 passes. So he had a great game on Monday night, had an incredible comeback. He is their offense. He did not practice on Thursday due to an illness. It's the second time this year he's already had an illness, but he'll be back. He'll play. The Chargers defense has looked really good, but they also were just exploited by giving up a lot of points to the Cleveland Browns. This, besides the Packers matchup, because I'm obviously the Packers fan is always going to favor the Packers matchup, but as a non team fan or just two good football teams, I'm very excited for this matchup on Sunday.
Definitely. Fantasy points everywhere. I don't care how good or bad the defenses are. This one I think is going to be a shootout. And I also want to mention if Lamar is going to if what we saw on Monday night with Lamar throwing for 400 yards, If you can get even majority of that or a piece of that in every game, not only is Hollywood Brown going to be a huge asset down the stretch, but I would watch out for Rashad Bateman. And I think that immediately would move Mark Andrews up into that top tier of tight ends as well. That passing offense was at a new level. I hope it stays that way because we've been hoping for that from the Ravens for a long time. And I also am not confident in any running back in that backfield now for the moment. And that is something I haven't said in years as well. It's just a new landscape for the Ravens. But if you're someone who grabbed Lamar Jackson, you are loving every second of this because he is putting up points and yards galore.
For sure. I'm with you. I'm not a huge fan of any of the running backs. If I had to play one, if I'm in a bind, I'm going to play Latavius Murray because I think he has the most touchdown potential. He's probably only going to get you somewhere 30 to 50 yards. So you're really going to be banking on that touchdown. But he seems to be the guy that's getting the goal line work when Lamar Jackson isn't running it in. Hollywood Brown, he has redeemed himself for those 3 drops against the Detroit Lions. He is the clear number 1 wide receiver. I do like what you mentioned about Rashad Bateman coming back. I wouldn't play him this week. It'll be his first ever NFL game action. He's more of a stash and hold type of guy, in my opinion. Hopefully, he's been sitting in your IR spot. You just elevate him to the bench, but could be a solid asset down the stretch. Pivoting over to the Chargers, man, Herbert's balling, Eckler's balling, Mike Williams is balling, and Keenan Allen's balling. They're all playing. Jared Cook's on the dartboard. I'm ready to put Parham on the dartboard. He just catches a touchdown like every other week. These teams, they're putting up points. If you're a Star Wars fans out there, make sure to go find on Twitter. I'll make sure to tweet it out on the Couch GMs Twitter. The chosen one of all the different Herbert haircuts that like line up with the first 3 episodes of Star Wars with Anakin Skywalker. So now they're calling him the chosen one. He sure looks the part, playing great. 2 of the front runners for NFL MVP at quarterback in this matchup. Great for fantasy, great for football.
Definitely. And with the Chiefs struggling so far this year, this could be like the battle for top seed in the AFC right now. That's how crazy this is. I don't have much more to say about the Chargers except play everybody. Maybe not automatically play Parham like you said, but he's on the dartboard maybe.
Now, I probably wouldn't play
I would
Parham,
say
Jalen Guyton. I wouldn't play those guys, but
no, no.
the guys that have been putting up points, they'll probably
Yes.
continue to put up points.
Agreed there. And I mentioned the Chiefs, so why don't we jump on to the Chiefs matchup then? They're going to the Washington football team. We can start with the Chiefs side. They were banged up like crazy last week. A lot of you have added Darrell Williams. That's somebody that I think you can start this week because Washington, even though they traditionally have a good front four, it has been awful this year. They are not stopping anybody. The Chiefs' run game should be all right this week because Williams is an established back, and I think they're going to give him enough work.
Yeah, I think Williams, we saw even last week. I don't even hate the Jerick McKinnon. If you're really struggling at running backs or you're in a super deep league, before Clyde Edwards went down, they were like 33, 33, 33% split between all 3 of them. Jerick McKinnon is most likely going to be more of your pass catcher, where Darrell Williams, I could see him getting some more of the goal line work, but you're playing for the Chiefs and Andy Reid. So the running backs aren't, the guys you want to heavily rely on. I know Tyreek Hill was a little banged up, but he's expected to play. Patrick Mahomes, for as much as they're struggling, is still a quarterback number 2 in fantasy. He is still putting up the points. Travis Kelce is still like the fantasy like idol at tight end. Like everybody wants him. But so the Chiefs are playing. But speaking of the Chiefs' struggles, it's mainly on their defense. So there's a lot of Washington football teams, even though they've had a struggling season so far. I think Taylor Heineke is in consideration for a streamer. Antonio Gibson, you guys need to stop doing this like randomly benching Antonio Gibson stuff. Like he should pretty much be a week to week starter at this point. You
No,
draft
I
him in
mean,
this.
I kind of want them to keep randomly benching Antonio Gibson because it seems like every week they decide to randomly bench him is the week he goes off. So, like, keep benching him, and those of us that won't join you will just keep reaping the benefits.
Yeah, well, if you play against someone that does, you'll be thanking them. But yeah, Antonio Gibson, he's a play. You're playing Terry McLaurin. I almost forgot his name because he probably just ran by me and caught another touchdown because I'm sure he'll put up a lot of points this week. And a guy I do want to mention, He's on the dartboard, and he's pretty darn close to the bullseye as far as tight ends go. And it sounds crazy, but Ricky Seals-Jones, he came in, he played like 99% of the snaps. He took all the work that while Logan Thomas was out. Taylor Heineke found him. He's not gonna, put up Travis Kelsey numbers, but if you just need a tight end, if you want 5 catches and hope that one of them is a touchdown, Ricky Seals-Jones is your guy.
It's true. And once you get past the top 4 tight ends, that's all you can really hope for. Want to throw a quick mention to Curtis Samuel. He's still, I feel like, dealing with some injuries. Do not start him. I'd still keep him on your team, though, and we'll see what happens as he turns back around. I think that's enough there for that game. We can move on to the Los Angeles Rams, traveling east as well to the New York Giants. The Giants are an absolute mess. I think we can probably start there. I'm not sure if there's any news on Kadarius Toney, but he seems to be, if he plays, the only wide receiver that is really relevant that's going to play for the Giants. And we are hearing good news on Daniel Jones, but we still aren't sure about him as well. Is there anybody in this Giants offense you are confident in starting just because they're so banged up?
Like you said, the matchup isn't great playing the Rams. Daniel Jones, he was spotted running, so that he's progressing through the protocol. We expect him to make it back on Sunday. Kadarius Toney was a limited participant, but Saquon's not practicing. Kenny Galladay's not practicing. I know Devontae Booker was a big name waiver wire fab budget guy this past week. But the Rams, they have a good defense. And the Giants, they're so banged up. I don't know if I trust them to score that many points. I'm sure, some people will say, well, Booker might be the only guy out there. Well, if you're struggling at running backs, you paid all that fab money or you used him as your number one waiver, you probably feel confident throwing him out there. For me, there's not really anyone on the Giants that I'm willing to touch, especially if Daniel Jones isn't out. Like if Mike Glenn is the quarterback, um, yeah, let's not do that at all. No Giants if Mike Glenn is the quarterback. Daniel Jones
No,
is
please
out
don't.
there. You know, I like their shots. Like you mentioned, Kadarius Toney has been balling out the last 2 weeks. Maybe we'll see an Evan Ingram signing so he can join the fantasy dartboard of tight ends. But yeah, the Giants, they're off to a rough start. They can't seem to stay healthy. Not looking good for the G-men.
Definitely not. Going to the Ram side, I think it's pretty self-explanatory, except I want to get your thoughts on where Robert Woods is these days, because we were so in and out on him, and he's been doing better lately. Are you in on Robert Woods, at least in this matchup?
Yeah, I feel like Robert Woods is going to be the guy that you have to start every week, but not going to feel great about it. Because I feel like the first 3 weeks it was all Cooper Cup, and now Cooper Cup has slowed down over the last 2 weeks, and it's been all Robert Woods. Like it doesn't seem to be like it doesn't seem it's like the DK Metcalf Tyler Lockett from last year. Which one is it going to be?
Uh-huh.
And I'm getting the same vibes from them. You're going to put him in your lineup. You're not going to feel good about it until he puts up, 120 yards receiving and a touchdown. And you're going to be like, oh, yeah, of course. I always trusted Robert Woods. What are you talking about? And then some weeks it'll be a Cooper Cup week and he'll get 3 targets. And you'll be like, what is going on? That just seems to be the way the Rams offense is flowing.
It's definitely frustrating, but there's no reason to bench Robert Woods, especially in this matchup. There's no reason to bench Cooper Cup either. You just kind of got to roll with the punches when it comes to that Rams offense. But I don't think there's anything else I want to add there. So we can go then to the Houston Texans traveling to the Indianapolis Colts. We can start with the Colts side, and I want to mention Michael Pittman because as much as he's been playing well, I just personally have this weird fear of putting him in my lineup, and I don't think I should. Can you kind of just talk me into feeling more confident about starting Pittman, especially in a situation with bye weeks?
Yeah, I mean, feel confident with Michael Pittman. We saw for the first time since he rolled both his ankles, Carson Wentz looked competent again at quarterback. He's a solid guy. The article isn't out on the website at the time of recording it, but hopefully it is out by the time you're listening to it on some sits and starts of this week. And Carson Wentz will be one of the start options against the Houston Texans. And if you're going to start Carson Wentz, you got to always look at the receivers the guy's going to be throwing to. I know T.Y. Hilton is close to be coming back, but Michael Pittman has been putting up decent fantasy points. He looked like a grown man out there making some great catches and, just owning the football field against the Ravens, especially in that first half before they started to make their comeback. He seems to have that connection. I'm not worried about Pascal. I'm not worried about T.Y. Hilton when he comes back. Michael Pittman is the number one option in the Indianapolis Colts. So sometimes it might not be the flashiest name, but sometimes it's better to play the top option in an offense than the third option in offense. So, I know we did lose Juju Smith Schuster, but, I'm playing Michael Pittman before I would have played him. I'm playing Michael Pittman before I'd play Tyler Boyd or T. Higgins, whichever one you view as wide receiver three. That's just how it's not. Again, it's one of those things that doesn't always feel great, but sometimes you just need to go where the points are. And Michael Pittman has been putting up points consistently.
I definitely feel better. Thank you, Cody, for elaborating on that one. Sticking with the Colts, I think you're definitely still playing Jonathan Taylor as well. Is this a matchup where you're confident playing either Nyheim Hines or Carson Wentz? I mean, I know the Texans defense has been pretty poor, but at the same time, a lot of the points that have been put up against them, I feel like have been in the ground game, not as much the pass game, because they still actually have, I think it's a top 10 defense against wide receivers, and it's pretty far up there against quarterbacks too.
Yeah, Carson Wentz, he looked like he was back. I'm not going to say back to where he should have won MVP before tearing his ACL. I'm not going that far. But you could see he's starting to get comfortable in the Frank Reich offense again. He's starting to move the ball. Jonathan Taylor is coming alive to take some pressure off of him. I like Jonathan Taylor this week, and I do like Carson Wentz to be an asset through the passing game.
Over to the Texans, maybe
Brandon
play Brandon
Cooks.
Cooks. That's it. Okay. Cody, I'll let you intro the next game. It's your favorite team.
Alrighty. At 1 o'clock on Sunday Eastern Time, noon kickoff in the Central Time. The NFL's oldest rivalry of the Green Bay Packers and the Chicago Bears take place at Soldier Field. It was great to hear. This has nothing to do with fantasy. Aaron Rodgers, because everyone assumes this is his last year in Green Bay. He was asked if he'll play for Chicago, if that was, and he said no, I'm not playing in Chicago. So Aaron Rodgers already hates the Bears. Everyone knows Bears Week's a big thing. Some of you people on Twitter get really weird about Bears Week, and we need to knock that off. I can't even tell you some of the tweets I said on the air. I'll tell George offline, and you can hit up his DMs for the full stories, or just go find him. Uh, Bears fans, you're a little weird, and the Packers fans are weird too. Like I know it's a huge rivalry. The Bears still suck, and unfortunately for the Bears, they are now down to running back number 3. Damian Williams went on the COVID list on Thursday. I believe he has still potential to make it back. Um, I don't know of his vaccination status, but if he is vaccinated, he just needs 2 negative tests within or 24 hours apart, so he could still make it back. But it's not looking good at this late in the week. He was a big pickup last week. Everyone that picked him up ran out to get Khalil Herbert because he still saw, I believe, 18 carries in last week when Williams and him like kind of did a split thing, and now without Williams, you believe Herbert will have a big role. The Packers defense, they've looked kind of better against the run. It's hard for me to say because I still have scars from the 2019 NFC Championship game where Raheem Mostert ran for 250 yards. So I'll never say that we're great at stopping the run until like we hold a guy to like -1 yards like the Buccaneers did against the Patriots. But I like Herbert this week if you need an option. Fields, I'm not a huge fan of this week. I'm not like Allen Robinson. Like I feel like he's a guy like you can't even trade him at this point because he's been nothing in fantasy. You got to find like a guy that had him on his team like 2 years ago. Now knows how good he is. Like he should eventually come around, but I'm not. I don't like him this week. I don't really like Darnell Mooney. I don't think the Bears are going to put up that many points. Now watch, I'm saying this, putting this all out there, and the Bears will put up 45 points, and I apologize in advance. But statistically, that's just not their game. Their game is to keep it close with the defense, win a close one, and honestly, that's how a lot of these Packers Bears games go. They go, they're 27-21, they're 24-20, like they're close games, and with that, there's not a lot of Bears players that I'm gonna hope to put up that many points.
Definitely. I mean, I'm confident starting Khalil Herbert, and my second most confident would have to be Justin Fields, just because I think their attacks can be based on the ground game. And of course, it's running backs first, and Fields right up there as 1B. So I don't like any of the wide receivers or tight ends. Really, I really hope Cole Kmet becomes good enough to make the dartboard, but not yet. I think that covers the Bears. We can move over to the Packers, and I think everything's pretty self explanatory except for AJ Dillon. He's finally seeing some work. Cody, are you confident enough to flex him?
Am I confident enough to flex him? If I needed, if I was really struggling with buys, I was devastated by injuries, I think you could throw AJ Dillon out there in a flex. Now, understand if you put him out there in your flex, a touchdown. He's really going to need a touchdown to be a solid fantasy option. He's just not. He'll have maybe 10 carries, maybe a catch or two. Um, Maybe he'll break one, maybe he won't. But you're really hoping for the touchdown out of him. But he is, providing that relief against or for Aaron Jones. But like I did say, these games are often held under 30 points. So again, this is AJ Dillon is like option number 4 or 5 on this team without MVS. So maybe against a really good defense, because that's what the Bears still are. They're still a top 5 defense. Maybe you look elsewhere. Um, Really, the only guys I feel confident playing is Devontae Adams because he's the best wide receiver in the league, and Aaron Jones because he's a top 10 fantasy running back and he gets his work. And I'm actually not even a huge fan of playing Aaron Rodgers this week. I'm not going to tell you to sit him because the last time I told you to sit him, he balled out. But just because the Bears defense is good, not a great matchup. I think there's some other streaming options out there.
All right. I think that'll cover there. And we can stay in the division with the Detroit Lions hosting the Cincinnati Bengals. The Detroit Lions are still pretty rough, and they lost Quintez Cephas last week. There's a lot of people making a run on the waiver wire for Amon-Ra St. Brown. I'm not confident enough to start him yet. I think if there's anybody that's going to start in this offense, it's got to be TJ Hawkinson and DeAndre Swift and potentially Jamal Williams if you're desperate at running back. I know some people that in our leagues have been devastated by running back injuries, and Williams is kind of their RB2 now. Not an awful play, not the best either though. I think that's pretty much everybody for Detroit that I would think about starting.
Yeah, I would say I am confident in Amon-Ra St. Brown. Jared Goff did say I want to see him get more involved. He's had 8 targets in the last 2 games. He's a rookie. He's starting to come around. They've already lost Cephas. They don't have much out there. Hawkinson was getting all the targets in the first couple weeks, and that has slimmed down. Williams did not practice on Thursday. So that's something to keep an eye on. If he doesn't play, Swift is a smash hit. Hopefully, I know Swift has been
Mhm.
up and down, but he's still the RB1 in that offense. He's and as hard as it is to find decent running backs, he's probably in your lineups most week. But yeah, Amon-Ra St. Brown. If you lost out on Deebo Samuel because you're on bye and you picked him up on waivers, feel like right in your lineups. That's how I feel about him. I'm pretty confident in him. And the Bengals, their cornerbacks are really good at tackling, but they're really good at tackling because they allow catches. And
Oh,
just, I mean, that's what happens. They're really good at tackling. I mean, they're going to be right there on their guy. You're going to need Jared Goff to make some throws. Like they're not incompetent corners. Like they're still really close to their guys. They'll break up a pass here and there. But the Bengals, their defense is pretty good. But I would still play Amon-Ra St. Brown for the Bengals though. Joe Mixon is the big question mark. He did play. He took the life out of Shamar Jean Charles on Sunday. Fun fact, I got yelled at by my fiance for clapping after the Bengals scored a touchdown because I was like, that was an incredible juke move. And then I realized where I was and I was like, oh, I can't be clapping right now. So I am sorry for all Packers fans out there. I did clap on that play, but the cut was incredible. Um, so his ankle is getting better. He's just not 100% healthy. With him playing, he only saw like 20 some percent of the snaps. So he's another guy, like even just because he's active, you might want to fade away from him because he's a running back that's only getting 20% of the carries. It's a tough call because Joe Mixon, he can score at any moment. He can go out there and get 15 carries and make it into something, even though he was supposed to be limited. But if there's a better option out there, I'd probably pivot off of Joe Mixon, unless you hear from the coach that there's no limitations.
See, I don't think there's going to be many limitations. Like the fact that he even played last week was good news because he was expected to be, you know, out injured, guaranteed. And all of a sudden he came in and played 20% of the snaps. And you're also looking at the guy who filled in as the starter, even though there was a mix, was Samaje Perine, and he's on the COVID list. Of course, he may be activated before the game, but if he's not active and Mixon is playing, automatically his capacity goes up. But I haven't
Well, don't
heard about
sleep on
any
Chris
kind of step
Evans,
back.
Captain America.
You're right. He's going to get some work, I think, regardless. But I think unless we hear that Mixon is still really struggling with this injury and he's going to be limited, this it's a guy they like getting 25 carries a game. So if you don't hear any news about any injury concerns, Mixon is a must start and go in your lineup, in my opinion.
That's right. We differ on that one, just like we differed on Amra St. Brown. So we'll have to definitely make sure you're paying attention to who's inactive, and we'll let you know if we hear anything over on our Twitter. But let's move to the 4 o'clock games. The Arizona Cardinals are the only undefeated team left, going up against the Cleveland Browns, who lost in a heartbreaking fashion, and probably the worst executed Hail Mary play I've ever seen in my life on Sunday night. But they get to play at 4 o'clock. Do you think the Cardinals stay undefeated before we even get into fantasy?
I'm going to say yes because I feel like it'd be fitting if the Cardinals lose being undefeated to one of the teams in that ridiculous division. I feel like it's going to be another great game and the Browns are going to hang in there and be a little disappointed again. And I hate to say it cuz the Browns are a great team, but I think the Cardinals got them and they're going to lose in a few weeks to some divisional team.
Gotcha. Alrighty, so you got your game pick. Now let's get into some fantasy breakdowns. We'll stick with those Arizona Cardinals here, expecting to win. But outside of Kyler Murray and obviously DeAndre Hopkins, because you drafted him to play him, like which guys on the off are you more confident than James Conner and Chase Edmonds? Are you more confident in AJ Green, Christian Kirk, Rondell Moore? Like there's just so many other options outside of those two. Like they're high powered offense, but they don't really have that many fantasy options.
I mean, with the running back split, I think I'm always going to be slightly more confident in Chase Edmonds because he's the big play threat. He plays better when he gets less carries. So as long as he's getting enough carries to have some opportunity, I think he's going to be the guy I'm more confident in that backfield. Still not the most confident, but there's always that chance with him. And of the wide receivers after DeAndre Hopkins, I don't love any of them. But with buys happening, I think I mentioned it last week in my waiver wire when I've been talking about how I keep dart throwing all these wide receivers in the on the Cardinals. I'm still, I think, on AJ Green because of his red zone usage. Um, and then they have a tight end go down with injury this week as well, Max Williams.
Yep, Max
So
Williams did leave the game with a pretty gruesome ankle upper leg injury from between the ankle and the knee. I'm not an anatomy expert. Head, shoulders, knees, and toes. That's about all I know from the anatomy. So between knees and toes, he had a pretty gruesome injury.
that's very, very informative of you there, Cody.
Follow Pro
So I
Football
mean,
Doc on Twitter if you want to have a more in depth uh, injury breakdown.
I don't have numbers in front of me, but I'm assuming that he was getting red zone targets too, because that's generally a tight end thing. So that would mean even more red zone targets out there for AJ Green to grab. And in this situation, with all these wide receivers not getting enough targets to get consistent weeks, you want the guy who's going to score the touchdown. He's probably the best chance that you score in the touchdown. That's why I'm there.
I got you. Yeah, Max Williams. He did look really good. He had about almost 20 targets on the season, so not great for receiver standpoints, but for a tight end, that's not bad through 5 weeks. 4 targets a game, and he's definitely came on starting this week 2, 3, and 4. So maybe just a slow start in week 1, but I tend to think he only had 1 touchdown on the season, and he seemed to be getting a lot more of his you know quick outs, quick ins. Like I feel like Rondo Moore could fill in for that guy, but I do like your analysis of if we're going for red zone targets, I think AJ Green is the guy to own. And then if you're in a bind and your opponent had all his guys play Thursday, the 9:30 London game and 1 o'clock, and if you still have your flex and you can, pick between AJ Green and Christian Kirk, like base it on how many points you need or what you think. If you need a huge game, throw Christian Kirk out there because he's always capable of a big deep shot or two where, he doesn't have as high floor, but he has a higher ceiling, but a lower floor than AJ Green. So something to keep about there. Let's pivot though and move on to the Cleveland Browns. Nick Chubb, starting him. Kareem Hunt, you're probably starting him.
But Kareem Hunt has been out of practice Wednesday and Thursday. That's worth noting. If he doesn't play, Nick Chubb, even more of a yes.
If he doesn't play, for sure, Nick Chubb, he's a yes no matter what. But if he doesn't play, I'm very interested for fifth round pick out of UCLA, Demetric Felton. There's players in every draft that I just fall in love with during the draft process. I don't care where they go. I think they're going to be stars. Demetric Felton is one of those guys. I know when we did our rookie draft for one of our dynasty leagues, it was like the sixth round, and George is like, "Do I take this running back or this running back?" And I'm like, "Demetric Felton. He's going to be legit." I don't know if he actually will be, but I'm very excited to see what he's done. He's already made some plays in the passing game. He's a pass catching running back that runs receiver routes. But talking about wide receivers, Odell Beckham. So,
Yeah.
is it true? Like, can he just not play with Baker Mayfield? Is that what's happening? Like, I don't like
I mean,
it's
I've
so
I've said that before. I've made that allegation, and people have gotten upset because they don't want to hear it, and it's still ringing true. It's still like I kind of want to just dig in and say, you know what, maybe it is, and I don't really want to believe it either. But I'm with it at this point. I don't. There's no other explanation to me.
yeah, it's so interesting. He's had less than or less than 3 fantasy points, two of the or 3 or less in 2 out of the 3 games that he's been back. They scored 42 points last week against
Mhm.
the Chargers, and
It's not a Jarvis Landry thing.
he had 2 catches. Like, they got other
Yeah,
people involved. Like, it's so interesting from Odell Beckham. I know did not have even his name recognition didn't get him drafted very high, but I'm sure there's someone in your league that is like, "Ooh, Odell Beckham." Like, you could probably flip him for someone a little bit decent. Like, here, I'll ask you, Odell Beckham or Michael Pittman. You said you didn't like Michael Pittman in your lineup,
but
but
you're asking me about a guy that I don't like also. So
I
Michael
know
Pittman.
okay. Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, on at the beginning of the season, if you told me to trade Odell Beckham for Michael Pittman, you'd be like, "That doesn't." We're talking about Odell
Yeah,
Beckham
you're
here.
right.
But
You're right.
now I'm telling you, go trade Odell Beckham for Michael Pittman. Like,
Mhm.
that's where you should be for doing. I have him in one league. I thought this might be his bounce back year. I'm interested to see if they are able to find a trade partner at the trade deadline in a few weeks, or if he'll just be stuck in Cleveland for another year.
Be very interesting to see. And we'll keep you updated on any injury news when it comes to Kareem Hunt. I'm really still not even sure what's going on, but there's just talks about him practicing off to the side. He's been listed as a non-participant or a limited, something like such. We can move on though to the Dallas Cowboys at the New England Patriots. It's actually a really small 4 o'clock window, just 3 games here this week in the 4 o'clock window. And I think one of my questions I'm gonna swing a little bit to defense here. Cowboys defense has been very good in fantasy. The Patriots offense not the greatest. Is that a streamer defense that you would think about this week, Cody?
Yeah, I think you have to consider the Cowboys as a potential streaming option. It's still weird to me to say the Cowboys kind of have a defense, but they have been. The Patriots, they're struggling to move the ball. Um, they did, and the Patriots just gave up 20 some points to the Houston Texans, so they're struggling to stop the ball. The Patriots are just struggling right now after looking so good against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in that big matchup. But yeah, I think you'd have to consider the Dallas Cowboys. I do think it's interesting. Trayvon Diggs, who leads the league in interceptions, I think he has like 6 through the first 4 games, like some here are some crazy stat like that. I did see a stat though that he's also like on pace to allow the most yards for any corner in a single season, like because he gives up so like he's such a ball hawk that he's like giving up the play like the yards, but he has 6 interceptions. So it's like, are you gonna like bench the guy for giving up yards when he's making so many plays for you? So, but fantasy wise, if he's gonna keep picking off the ball, and he'll probably be able to get rookie Mac Jones once or twice. Yeah, the Cowboys, they're right up there in the potential streaming options.
Definitely there. Moving on to their running backs, I want to say. I mean, Zeke seems to be pretty much a go. I don't know if Tony Pollard, what his injury status is, but if he plays, is he somebody also you're interested in starting this week?
I think if he's, if healthy enough to, play, we don't hear anything that he's um in like limited, or I think he could be a solid flex option, especially as bye week start. It is a bad matchup, but you expect Zeke to carry the ball a decent amount, get a touchdown or two. So I'd love Zeke in this matchup, but Tony Pollard is probably pretty safe. The one guy I did want to ask you about is I know Dalton Schultz has balled out, so he's probably consideration for your tight end. He's a guy that gets 6 targets a game, and you just wonder if he's going to get a touchdown, and that's what you need out of your tight ends. But a guy we don't talk about a lot, and nobody talked about him when Michael Gallup went down, but Cedric Wilson, he has been putting up some solid performances. He's reliable. Again, we're talking about option 3, 4 for receiving options. If you want to, and then maybe even a little bit lower if you want to um, drop the quarterback or the running backs. But with buys coming up, it's a plus matchup.
Hmm.
Are you playing Cedric Wilson? Or still is it still too deep?
I mean, I've been so against Cedric Wilson this whole time, but now that we're getting into bye weeks, I think this is where you have to start considering him. He's still probably pretty low on my flex rankings, but if you're confident because he has had a good track record, I would not hate putting him in my starting lineup as my flex this week.
Gotcha. All right, real quick. Amon St. Brown or Cedric Wilson? Number one in Detroit or number 3 or 4 in Dallas? It's a tough decision.
I think I would have to go St. Brown because of the number 1 versus number 4, but it's really close in my
Got
opinion.
All righty. I picked a good one. I'm definitely Amon St. Brown on that one, but let's move over to the New England Patriots. And this team has so many options of mediocrity that I don't even know how I want to play any of them in fantasy. Uh, Hunter Henry looks like the most viable option at the tight end.
He's made the dartboard.
He's made the dartboard. Is still not a guy I love. You know,
No.
Damian Harris. We expect big things out of him, but he fumbled yet again. And you saw, what Bill Belichick. You remember Jonas Gray? He had like 200 yards in the game and then fumbled twice and like never played again. So we know Bill Belichick will just pull a running back for because he fumbles. He doesn't care how good he is. So that concerns me a little bit. I know they spent a first round pick on Damian Harris, so I don't expect them to cut him or anything like that. Brandon Bolden, who's been there forever, has looked like
I didn't
a
even know he was still on that team. And then, like, 2 years down the road, he'll get work and it'll be like, dang, he's still there. And then another 2 years down the road, it repeat for like the last 10 years.
I know he's the Udonis Haslam of the NFL. I feel like I'm like, you're still on the team, and Udonis Haslam, I believe, still plays for the Miami Heat, and he's been there
What?
forever. I know it's crazy. Don't get me wrong, but Brandon Bolden has, since James White went out, has 4 targets and 6 targets in those 3 games. So he's getting some targets. He had 6 receptions in week 4, 4 in week 5. So he's been getting some work in the passing game. So he could be a sleeper guy in like a full point PPR, just because he's getting the passing work, which is surprising as all get out. But that's the New England backfield for you. It's just
Somebody needs
hard.
to take James White's catches.
Yeah, and it seems to be Brandon Bolden as for now. So it'll probably be some guy that we haven't heard of
It'll probably be
starting next.
Ramondre Stevenson this week, and then it'll be some random fourth guy. You're right.
Yeah. So it's not a guy that I love. I don't love any of these Patriots offense against the Dallas Cowboys, but they will probably most likely be down, and they'll most likely be throwing the ball a lot. So maybe the check down running back is a solid flex option if you're desperate. And I definitely wouldn't play him in like standard scoring. He just doesn't get enough work. But full point PPR or half point PPR, maybe a guy like Brandon Bolden is a guy that just might want to keep your name and keep your eye on.
All right, really quick. So you're talking about you don't really like anybody else. Jacoby Myers was a guy some people started last week. Put him up with Amonra St. Brown, and who you starting there?
I'm still playing Amon St. Brown.
Okay, got it. We can move on then to the last of the 4 o'clock games. We got the Denver Broncos hosting the Las Vegas Raiders, the Grudenless Las Vegas Raiders. We won't really get into much detail on that one, but sounded like something needed to be done there. I'm kind of glad it was.
Oh, for sure.
But I think that the Raiders are going to be in a bit of a transition now. They were such an they seem like they were finally established in that Gruden scheme. They were a 3-1 team, and now I am worried about that team because I don't know if there's going to be any hiccups as they change over to a new coaching staff, if there was any distractions because of what happened. Are you worried about anybody on that Raiders team?
So I'm really torn about the whole Raiders situation in general. I'm not torn about the outcome. He definitely
Yeah.
just needed to be let go based on the multiple years of emails that came out, and you can look up more. We're going to keep it more about fantasy, but again, I'm 100% with the Raiders moving on and John Gruden not becoming a distraction and figuring out what he needs to be done on that standpoint. But I'm almost curious if this is like a galvanizing moment for the locker room. Like, we're bigger than this coach. That's not us. We're the Las Vegas Raiders. Even though he was the head coach, that's not who we are. Like, does this moment bring this team together to like we need to put something good behind the Las Vegas Raiders name, or does this team completely fall apart because of all the outside noise, all the distractions? We'll have to wait and see. I do know it was their special teams coordinator and longtime assistant to John Gruden, who is now the interim head coach. So not too much schematically should change. Maybe he'll use Kenyon Drake because they
Whoa.
paid for Kenyon Drake. So maybe we'll see a Kenyon Drake sighting. I'm not saying put him in your starting lineup. So you probably on your free agency at this point, and you can wait to see if they use him to pick him back up. But it was Gruden that loved Peyton Barber. So with the change, maybe Kenyon Drake, starts to see some of the field. I love Darren Waller. I mean, if you have him at tight end, like you're playing Darren Waller, please Las Vegas, I keep wanting to say Oakland, but please, Las Vegas, get Brian Edwards involved more before the last 2 minutes when you need a catch on third down. Like, I don't know what that's about. Like, Brian Edwards hasn't seen him all game. Oh, I need a big catch on third down. Brian Edwards at the end of the game. He's good
Pretty
at football.
much.
You can play him all 4 quarters, Las Vegas, if you didn't know that. So those are like the things I'm looking forward to seeing how they're going to implement some players that I've liked that haven't been utilized in ways that I have been, not rushing them into my starting lineups, and honestly, this Broncos defense is still pretty good. I know Derek Carr's been putting up some elite numbers, but I might be fading him a little bit if I can find a solid streaming option because I don't view Derek Carr as an every week starter. Josh Jacobs, not I haven't been a huge fan of him all offseason. He's still struggling for me. But outside of Darren Waller, there's not a ton of guys. I'm more of a wait and see mode. I guess that was a
Mhm.
long way to get around to I'm just wait and see with the Las Vegas Raiders.
You still almost said Oakland at the
I
end there,
know.
but you caught
They need to go
yourself,
back
so
to
I'll give it
Oakland.
to you. They probably will in 5 years, let's be honest. Something will make them angry. No, I hope not with that new stadium they got there. But no, I'm pretty much with you. I'd probably say you almost have to start Josh Jacobs most of the time because you don't have much better options at running back, probably. Darren Waller and everyone else I'm waiting and seeing. I'm not dropping someone like a Henry Ruggs yet, but I'm not starting him definitely this week. Going over to the Broncos side, I mean, I don't think too much has changed. Both running backs are getting involved right now. Are you confident starting either Melvin Gordon or Javante Williams more? Are you confident starting either of them?
I don't love starting either of them. I think right now Melvin Gordon is still slightly out touching
Hmm.
Javante Williams. So for that reason alone, I would say I favor Melvin Gordon. But Javante Williams is a guy I could definitely see start to overtake and be a solid fantasy running back down the stretch. Maybe he's a guy that if you're trading, you throw in Javante Williams. Like, oh, you want to do this 2 for 2 or this 2 for 1? Well, maybe we'll make it a 2 for 2 and you throw in Javante Williams, that type of thing. As a guy, more of like a stash and hold guy, I think he can be super valuable down the stretch, but not this week. And again, the Raiders defense, I feel like the Raiders knew or John Gruden knew about his whole ordeal on Sunday, because well, one, he was fired Sunday night, and two, they put up uh, a shit show against the Chicago Bears. I don't know if I'm allowed to say shit show on the show, but I just did. And that's what the game was against the Chicago Bears. They looked out of sync. There was definitely something going on behind the scenes. I think he knew he wasn't fully into the game. He knew that there was going to be some repercussions. And there is that whole thing of like, when a new coach comes in, that interim head coach, it does rally the team. So it could be that moment, and I'm just not a big fan of all the Broncos options. Like, don't get me wrong, I'll still play Cortland Sutton. Tim Patrick has been super solid. He's another guy that you're like, Tim Patrick, maybe because he is, no offense, Tim Patrick, you're a lot better at football than I will ever be. But I feel like your name has some reason why people don't like you in fantasy. Like Tim Patrick just doesn't sound like a guy you want to play in fantasy football, but you
It's
should.
it's something about someone with 3 first names because his middle name's Michael, so he is Tim Michael Patrick. It's just 3 first names don't sound good.
Yeah, it doesn't sound the best, but he's probably in your lineup. Running backs, I'm not a big fan of. And then of course Noah Fant because he's a tight end that sees volume.
Yes, definitely there. I agree with everything there. I don't think I have too much to add. So we can move on then to Sunday Night Football, where we have the Russell Wilson-less Seattle Seahawks traveling to Pittsburgh to visit the Steelers. I think we have to start with the Seahawks side. You're most likely still starting DK. You're most likely still starting Lockett. Are you tempering expectations because of Russell Wilson being out?
I think you have to, especially with a guy like Tyler Lockett. I feel like Tyler Lockett gets a boost for playing with Russell Wilson because they have that on the field ESP. They have that connection. Him and Geno Smith most likely don't have that. Now Geno Smith did look pretty good when he came in relief after um, Wilson hurt his finger on that Thursday night game, and he's had 10 days to prepare for this because they play the Thursday night game in week 5. So I'm tempering expectations. I think DK Metcalf will be relatively about the same what he was at, maybe a little bit less for Tyler Lockett. You know, the big question mark in this game is we still don't really know is Chris Carson. It came out that he had a neck injury that like it will take a while to heal, but he might be able to play with it because he really can't do any more damage, but they're still weighing their options. Anytime you start talking necks in football, like that should just wave a red flag. Alex Collins didn't look too great in relief. I mean, he got the volume, so that's a plus, but it is the Steelers defense. So really none of the running backs I'd probably put Carson out there if he plays, just because it's Chris Carson. He does put up but again, it's the Steelers defense. Like if I can move off the Seattle backfield, I would.
I'm with you there. I'm not touching the Seattle backfield if I can help it, just because I think it has to be Chris Carson or bust, and Chris Carson's not going to be confidently in my lineup until I hear him have a full week of practice or they say he's totally over this neck issue, because that scares me. The word neck and injury is not good. Um, Moving on to the Steelers side, you have to start their wide receivers now, in my opinion. Deontay Johnson and Chase Claypool locks in your lineup, in my opinion.
Yeah. They're they're about as close as locked as you can get. I still favor Deontay more than Chase
Me too.
Claypool. I think it's Deontay's the clear one, Claypool's the clear two, but they did just lose Juju for the rest of the year. So again, it's no longer like is it the we saw it, when T Higgins was out in Cincinnati, like instantly or Tyler Boyd and Jamar Chase were both viable fantasy options. T Higgins was back and it took a big play for Jamar Chase, and then the other two were kind of meh. So with just the two there, I do like both their options. Najee Harris, the dude just seeing incredible volume for a running back that is so hard to find these
Had a
days.
breakout week last week, too.
Yeah, he's starting to come around. Big Ben looked the best he's looked all season. We'll see if that was an anomaly or the new standard. Maybe the Pittsburgh Steelers are about to get back on track, and you expect a Sunday night game against the Seattle Seahawks with Geno Smith could be that opportunity. So I do like the offensive options for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Definitely agree with that. I don't want to say I told you so, but a lot of you guys seem to be coming back around on me with my three's too much, but two's okay. And now people seem to be seeing some facts when it comes to that. We'll see if the Steelers prove me wrong now that I tried to gloat a little bit. But a team with many, many passing options that are doing well but inconsistent would be the Buffalo Bills playing on Monday Night Football against the Tennessee Titans. So we're going to do this every week. It seems like we're going to do it again. We could start with the running backs if we wanted to, but we'll go to the wide receivers first. After Stephon Diggs, who you playing in the Buffalo Bills wide receiver attack?
Emmanuel Sanders. Emmanuel Sanders is the
Emmanuel
number 2
Sanders.
option. Yep. Hey, it's not even really a question for me. He's past Cole Beasley as the number 2 option in Buffalo. They're putting up a ton of points. Sanders, he's seeing more air yards. He's getting about the same amount of targets, and if they're getting about the same amount of targets, you want the guy that's further down the field. So Emmanuel Sanders, I'm pretty confident in starting him as a wide receiver 2 flex option until I'm proven otherwise. In all honesty, he's looked great. Hopefully, he can stay healthy. I know that is a little bit of an issue with him. You mentioned the running backs. Like, I guess it's Zach Moss. Like, I feel like now Zach Moss has taken the step to prove to be the top running back. Now, Devin Singletary will probably get the rushing touchdown this week because I because I said that on the podcast. But again, the Bills just throw the ball all over the field. Like, I don't
Mhm.
really want to mess with their running backs. Like, if I'm super hurting, like I'll throw Zach Moss out there because you want parts of a high scoring offense. But after you know, Stephon Diggs, who hasn't had a breakout game yet, but it is coming. They're it is so close. It could be this week. Emmanuel Sanders, Dawson Knox, he has put himself considerably into that weekly tight end starter, which is great for all us tight end people that were picked him up in week 2. If we got a solid guy on fantasy that we can rely on, that's a huge win for all of us out there. But yeah, the Buffalo Bills, I don't know how they lost to the Steelers in week 1. That just goes to show you how weird of a week 1 it is, but they look incredible right now. I believe they were your Super Bowl pick. My
Mhm.
only concern with them from a non-fantasy perspective, just talking NFL, is have they peaked too early? Like, are we seeing the peak of the Buffalo Bills? Will they be able to sustain this for another 15 weeks? That's the real
True.
question.
That is true. I just want to hit on Zach Moss a little bit more because you can't forget how many running backs are just missing right now. Between CMC might not playing, people even picked up Damian Williams and now he's on the COVID list. Bye weeks, you're missing Cordell Patterson, Mike Davis, Elijah Mitchell, Alvin Kamara. Like there's just so many running backs out. If you have to start Zach Moss, it's not as bad as it seems. Just because you're probably going to see lower scores from running backs this week because there's so many high-powered guys either hurt or on bye or whatever it might be. And if you get a touchdown out of Zach Moss, you're already probably scoring 10 points with how he's been playing. So that's fine. If he can do that for you, that's good. Moving on to the Titans side, that's a running back you're not worrying about. But
Yeah, start Derrick Henry.
I
That's
mean,
pretty safe,
yeah.
self-explanatory.
um, so AJ Brown, he's got to be in your lineup. Don't know what's going on with Julio still. We don't know if we're going to see him or not. Um, if he is playing, are you worried about him being limited? Would you not play him for a week, especially in a tough matchup against the Bills?
Yeah, with Julio being, you know, he was a full participant in practice. So was AJ Brown. So he seems to be back. But because he plays on Monday night, like I'm not like if you're in the luxury situation where you were able to get Emmanuel Sanders this week, last week, 2 weeks ago off waivers, and you have Julio Jones, and it comes down to Monday night and Julio's ready to go, I might throw Julio out there. But that's because I have Emmanuel Sanders as a backup. I don't know if I feel that confident if it was Cole Beasley, if I could pick up Cole Beasley and start him. Julio, because it's a Monday night game, he only really had one good game when he was healthy. He's missed some time. I need to see it again. Like and this Bills defense is really good. Like it's going to be a very tough matchup. We think, and we can't fully predict say it with any 100% certainty, but this should be a tough matchup for the Tennessee Titans, they struggled against the Jets. Uh, they struggled in the first half against the Jacksonville Jaguars. They haven't been firing on all cylinders. Maybe it's because they've been limited with some of their offensive weapons. But this matchup will be a tough one, and I definitely am because it's a Monday night game. I have a hard time saying start Julio with confidence.
I'm with you there. I mean, I know that you could end up sitting Julio and he could go off for 20 points. It's just what happens. But I would pump the brakes on him this week as well, just because you don't know for sure he's going to play or if he's going to be limited. There's too many question marks for a Monday night game, in my opinion. I'm with you on that one. But I think that'll wrap up all of our week 6 fantasy previews. So we can move on to a little fun game of buy low, sell high.
You want to start?
Sure. So I want to take a peek at the Eagle score here quick. Zach Ertz scored a touchdown. That's not shocking. 14-7.
Buccaneers have
Buccaneers
14.
14-7. Yeah. Okay. All right, let's play a little buy low, sell high. For those of you who don't know what we're going to do, we're going to each go with one buy, one sell. We're going to give you some guys that we think you should buy before they hit their peak here, try to get them at a value, and guys who maybe are peaking that you should sell while they're there before they drop back off. So Cody, I'm going to let you start it off here with your buy low candidate.
All right, so I'll start with my buy, and I mentioned it a little bit when we just broke down the Monday night game, but I'm talking Stephon Diggs. Now, the guy, he has 48 targets on the season, and they've only connected 28% of the time. He only has one touchdown on the season. He's a guy that you should be trying to trade for. Emmanuel Sanders, I believe, is outscoring him at this point in total fantasy points. Maybe it's he depending on your league because he has more catches, he might be a little bit higher. But that's what we're talking about, Stephon Diggs. He was the second round pick. The guys that were taking him at the beginning of round 2, they might be a little disappointed with this fantasy outcome. If you could move somebody to acquire Stephon Diggs, this Bills offense isn't going away. Stephon Diggs proved last year that him and Allen have the connection. They've been a little off to start the season. I expect him to come around and get that completion percentage up more towards 60 to 70%. Hit some of those big deep shots that they have just missed on. So before Stephon Diggs has his true breakout game, I'd go ahead and try to acquire him.
I like that call because it's somebody that you feel like is going to be just a lock and he's going to be a top 10 receiver, but he has been disappointing. So there's probably owners out there that are frustrated in Stephon Diggs, and you can probably get him at more of a value than you'd expect. I'm going to stick at the wide receiver position for my buy, but I'm going to give you two, and that'll be the Steelers wide receivers we mentioned a short time ago. So with Juju getting hurt, that trio becomes a duo. I think that immediately gives a bump to Deontay Johnson and Chase Claypool. Hopefully now they can start to carve out more roles where it's like Deontay Johnson's going to be the guy who gets the higher volume and the receptions, and Chase Claypool's the down the field threat. But with how much the Steelers like to throw the ball, that volume is going to be great for fantasy. You're not going to have to worry about one of them having a dud week because Juju's going to get 9 targets this game. Their other receiving options are nothing special. So go out there and get the Steelers receivers before they play here for another week, full week without Juju, and really show where their ceilings can be.
That's another great pick. I would have taken them if you didn't. But let's move to some sell candidates. Some guys that they might have had some big weeks, and you're trying to move them. And this guy, he had a big week, but he's also had a big season. But now might be his highest value yet. And I'm talking about wide receiver Mike Williams. Now he's number 5 in the NFL in receiving yards, but he's seeing less targets than Keenan Allen. He has less catches than Keenan Allen. He has 5 more touchdowns than Keenan Allen. I expect that to have some regression and Keenan Allen start to see the end zone a little bit more. Now, again, the Chargers are a high scoring offense. They will probably most likely be able to sustain 2 fantasy relevant wide receivers throughout the season. But we all know Mike Williams has a serious injury history. We're not ever, planning for injuries, hoping for injuries by any means, but keep that in the back of your mind. Maybe you could trade him for a top fantasy option. Maybe you're really hurting at running backs and you can flip him for a running back because you got Mike Williams so late. You probably have some other viable receiving options. So again, this is more of not so much I don't like the Mike Williams the player. I think he'll still be relevant all season long, but I expect Keenan Allen to slowly and take over more and more, and that only means Mike Williams goes down, and I believe his value is at the highest at this moment.
Definitely. You're just saying sell him at his wide receiver 1 value he's at now before he slips back down to the wide receiver 2 flex where he will probably sit for the rest of the season. That's a good call. And I'm going to kind of go off the same thing with tight ends. And I know saying sell a tight end sounds ridiculous because we're all looking so hard and we all want to stick to the guy who scored the big amount of points last week. We're all chasing fantasy points. Let's not chase fantasy points with Kyle Pitts. And don't hear what I'm not saying. Kyle Pitts is going to be a guy you're probably starting most weeks the rest of the season. But do we really expect him to put up 25 points a week the rest of the season? No. When people see that in a tight end on a guy who already was relevant, they're going to go out there and buy like crazy because they want to get a piece of that tight end pie that's so small. And he only got all of that work because of all the injuries they had at wide receiver. There was no Russell Gage. There was no Calvin Ridley. So, and they were playing in a good matchup. So all the things just came together for Kyle Pitts to have a big week, and he's going to come back down to earth, whether it's, next week, he's on a bye this week, or right after when they get everybody back together in that wide receiver room. He's going to go back to that 8 point a week tight end. So if you can sell him while he's on this high of top 5 tight end, you can probably get yourself another tight end back that's not quite as flashy and a wide receiver to play in your flex. That would be a good move. People like chasing fantasy points. Exploit that with Kyle Pitts.
Yeah, even look at another tight end, like a guy like Darren Waller. He had 6.5 fantasy points last week. We talked about all this stuff that the Raiders are going through, but Darren Waller's still going to be, fantasy pretty good. So maybe, you throw Kyle Pitts and another player, and you get Darren Waller and Javonte Williams, a guy we liked as a potential stash for the second half of the season. Take advantage of these opportunities, guys that are out there that had big weeks that haven't been consistent. Try to get them for a guy that's had maybe a down week or have been, a down week or two, but we're consistent for the first couple games. Maybe that's what you have to do. You always have to be trying to improve your fantasy team. I know I'm a big fan of the trade, despite not making any in our league of record yet, which I probably is a new record that it's been week 5 and I hadn't made a single trade. But at, people know I would just like to send trade offers, so sometimes it's hard for me to get the conversations going. But always be trying to improve your team. But we didn't have that many games as the last few weeks, but we went way too long on this episode. So let's get out of here. So let's thank you all for listening to another episode of the Couch GMs podcast. It was always fun with George and I breaking all the games down. And Tyler's not here, but he would love to tell you this podcast is more fun for you and more fun for us when you get involved.
Yes, it is. Make sure you check out thecouchgms.com for Cody posting his starts and sits of the week for week 6. And you can also check out my waiver wire columns every week. Even check it out this week. Maybe some guys slipped through the waivers this week and they're still sitting out there. And thank you one more time for listening into this episode of the Couch GMs podcast. For Cody Roadcap, I'm George Kerth. And we'll see you all next Tuesday for week 7 waiver wire.